Welcome back to the Chamber Report. We're here with Steve Lamb and Carter Henney, and we're talking about the pilot project on Kings Bay. And you've all read about it, heard about it. The $1.6 million was approved. We're explaining to you today what all that entails. And when we left off, Carter, you were telling us about the replanting. And I think that's a part of the project that the community doesn't fully understand. But then you look at that, Steve, and you say, okay, well, how does that become viable? That plant has to grow and prosper and not become a meal for our manatee friends.
Well, maintenance. These cages that Sea and Shoreline have developed, there's a good picture of it, that fit firmly into the ground with what I'll describe as some sandbags around it to hold it. Keeps the potential herbivores?
Herbivores, yes.
I learned that name. The herbivores, which includes manatees and several other species, from eating the plants before they get well rooted and can grow to a height of 28 inches, at which point they start pollinating. So I'm kind of getting into Carter's expertise here now.
Well, and that's interesting because they do start pollinating and they kind of start seeding the floor.
Right, that's the goal of this project, is to maintain these plants and just treat it like you would any other rose garden or your front yard. Your front yard's never going, well, I don't know how good your front yard is, but everyone has sod in Crystal River because they maintain it, they work it. And then if you just work it a little bit and keep the plant safe, and then it's going to have these rhizomes that are going to connect from one cage to the next cage. These cages are going to be placed at 15 feet on center, so there's going to be plenty of...
and that will entail how many cages for this first phase of the project?
We estimate that it's going to take around 360 cages over a 3.5 acre plot.
And you'll have about 5 plantings within each cage?
Correct. Because the plant wants to grow. If we let the plant do its thing, it's going to grow and it's going to coalesce and it's going to go from one cage to the next cage to the next cage. And if a manatee or a turtle or a duck does decide to eat that leaf structure on top when it's not protected, well, it still has the rhizomes underneath. And as soon as that duck goes away or that turtle goes away, that plant is going to sprout new leaves. It's similar to cutting your lawn. Mowing the grass creates a dense grass bed, and that's exactly what we want. So we really anticipate and want for those grazers to come in, because that's what makes this grass so important, is it is the base of the food chain.
And so we're getting rid of stuff that's not healthy for the bay, which is the Lyngbia, and we're putting in stuff that is healthy for the bay and all the creatures that live in the bay. Absolutely.
So these plants not only provide protection from, they shelter all the invertebrates, small fish, but they're also going to be releasing oxygen through photosynthesis, and they're also going to be uptaking carbon and placing it into the root structure and the rhizome. So it's going to be sequestering carbon as well, and uptaking nutrients. So a main cause of algal blooms is nutrients. So when these excess nutrients are going to be removed through the vacuum dredging process, these plants are going to continue to sequester these nutrients and put it into the seabed where it's not available to the algae blooms. And it's also going to, right, and it's also going to get suspended solids. So all those little sand particles that are floating around in the bay, what grass does is it sequesters the sand out of the water column. And it's hard to describe, but the best analogy I've come up with or heard about is it's like when you're walking on the beach. You walk from the beach inside your house and you walk on tile floor. Well, you walk back outside and your feet are still sandy. However, if you walked on carpet while you were inside, all the sand off the bottom of your feet are going to be cleaned off. And that's exactly what those leaves do. They're scrubbing the water column as the water flows in and out. So it's just this sponge of nutrients. I mean, it's hard to say. We'd be here all day if we started talking about.
Well, I mean, you explained it pretty well in layman terms. So Steve, what does the bay look like in a year then, or 2 years?
Well, the area,
This area.
Josh, the 3.5 acres that we are going to clean and replant will look like Kings Bay did in the mid-70s. White sand bottom with the beneficial waving eelgrass. And this is in layman's terms, we can get ahead of the limbia. It's my understanding limbia cannot survive in an oxygenated environment. So you've got these plants kicking off oxygen and the other things that Carter spoke of, and the limbia won't come back. The problem we have now is even if the beneficial plants were there, there's so much limbia over them, they can't get sunlight, they can't grow. So, and the nutrients are horrible from all the years of spraying, the invasive species that were in the river, the runoff, which of course they no longer spray invasive species, and I know that the Florida DOT and Citrus County are working very hard to hold back the runoff into Kings Bay. And of course there's a lot more to this story. I mean, cleaning the bay is one thing, but for long-term sustainability we've got to clean up the spring shed. We've got to get more people on septic systems. We've got to sequester fertilizer use. Excuse me, off septic systems. Off of septic systems and onto sewer systems. Sorry about that. Yeah.
And you know, there's baby steps in that area, but I mean, we've been talking about this for years. It's really going to take some courage to just say, let's do it, let's bond it, let's do whatever we have to do, but let's, you know, get rid of these septic.
As Governor Scott would say, water is Florida's greatest asset, past its people, and we've got to protect that. This bay is at a tipping point right now, and those of us that have lived on it all these years and people that visit, swimming with the manatees and what have you, you can, in most places of the bay, if you can see a foot into the water, you're lucky. And that's a combination of many, many years of problems, and we can make a huge difference now. Whether we clean up the spring shed or not, we can get the detrital material, those nutrients out of the bay, get the beneficial plant lives going, and the water column will start taking care of itself.
Well, I mean, there's positive areas. I mean, there's positive news in all these other areas you're talking about. I know that they're doing some runoff mitigation on Cutler Spur.
Yes.
And all the agencies seem awake and aware.
They are.
And, you know, the government went through some problems too financially. They didn't have any extra money to spend on, and the environment is usually one of the first places. You know, they got to keep the cops on the beat, they got to keep firefighters. The environment kind of suffers during a bad economy. But it's people like your group, Steve, that keep these issues in the forefront and get action. And we're going to talk about action, how we got to where we're at and where we need to go right after this break.